Hey folks, Chris Crazy House here, back with some more Chris Crazy commentary. So it was announced a few days ago that DC Comics and Warner Brothers is going to do yet another round of firings and layoffs for its comics imprint. So this is probably the third, at least the third firing that has gone on since the springtime. You know, I know that COVID-19 and the pandemic and the lockdowns have hurt the comic book industry a lot, but you know, we can also make the argument that a lot of the decisions that the comic book industry has made up until now have not helped either. In fact, it's almost kind of like all the bad decision making as far as the direction of certain characters and storylines and the identity politics that they've tried to shove into a lot of their modern comics was basically the setting up of the dominoes, and you know, COVID really just was the fingers that plucked that one domino that knocked all the other ones down. And it's real bad out there for anyone who's looking to get into the mainstream comic book industry. Now, if you're independent, I think you're a lot better off, especially if you're doing your own book, or if you're collabing with someone else and doing your own books rather than trying to work at any of these big companies anyway. So it's not really going to affect you. In fact, it might help you if one of these major artists or writers is looking for work and they'll lower themselves to come work for you if you got that kind of scratch and that type of money to pay these folks, because they're not going to be able to work in the mainstream much anymore. And even so, this is going to send a big reverberation shockwave throughout the comic book industry. And they really have no one to blame but themselves in this regard. Now, what's interesting about this round of firings is that it's so bad that they fired the people who were supposed to notify other people that they're going to be fired. That's how bad it's gotten. They've let go some of the people in editorial and HR who were supposed to tell their writers and artists that, hey, you're not going to have any work in about 3 months or so, right? The people on the art side found out that they weren't going to have a job when they looked at the periodicals and saw that their books were not going to be picked up in the coming year. So that's how bad it's gotten over at DC. And, what's going to cause some issues with some of these other, maybe if you're a young artist or you're not as well known as some of these major artists and you're trying to get into the industry, or maybe you're working on a lesser book in some of these other companies, whether it be Marvel, Image, IDW, what's some of the other ones? I don't think Dark Horse exists anymore, but you know what the other comic publishers are there, Boom and stuff like that. Now you have some of these major writers and artists who are going to be looking for work as well, and they're going to push out anyone who's on the periphery or just getting started. So that's bad, in my opinion, for the industry. The same thing happened in my industry, the animation industry, back in 2008, 2009, when we had that big economic crash. And a lot of major animation studios that were rocking and rolling during the early 2000s, now they were starting to let a lot of people go. So that kind of filled up all the slots in any animation studio. If they were able to hire, they would just hire one of these major guys who had a name, and maybe they'll take a lesser rate just so they can keep working. And anyone just getting started would not be able to find work because they didn't have the same name as some of these major animators or character designers or whatever. And that industry's collapse. The only thing I can really blame the animation industry for is not sticking together when it comes to pushing back against the corporate side of things. So in that regard, it's somewhat their fault for that. But with the comics industry, they have a little bit more control over what's put out there, and they just kind of all went along to get along with whatever identity politics was out there, and it's really bitten them in the backside this time, because now you're just out of work. And if Marvel is going down as well, you're not going to be able to find work there either. And if some of these other studios are just barely hanging on, you're not going to be able to find work there at all. And the only thing you could probably hope to do maybe is create your own book for a change. But will that be successful? I mean, if you can't ride the coattails of these major characters like Batman or Teen Titans or X-Men, and you're working on those books and those are not selling, when you have a major company behind you and major distribution behind you, then your fan fictions or your own original characters that you want to create with these types of stories are definitely not going to sell. So I don't know what they're going to do. It's just going to be a real sad case out there. Or maybe they'll vanish and go back to where they were supposed to be in the first place, in Hollywood or writers or whatever. But like I said, will they still be having any success when they can't suck off of these major character IPs that they have been sucking off of for the last 10-20 years? I doubt it. And another interesting fact is that I think a lot of unless you're a major character in some of these comic book companies, you're not going to get the same shine or the same release as the other ones. A lot of the side characters or secondary characters are just probably going to wind up being more backup stories, and they've already started cutting down the book releases. They're not going to be releasing as many comic books every month, and even that is going to change more into like a graphic novel or Shonen Jump style collected version of the comic book periodicals. I mean, I'm surprised Americans haven't started doing that more anyway. I mean, I think Japanese have more success by doing that. But, that's probably the future of where things are going to go. You're not going to get the same amount of releases that we have been having over the years. And it's a shame for, if you were a fan of maybe one of these lesser comic book heroes or teams or whatever, they're just going to cut them off and just keep with the majors. And that's just what's going to have to be. Now, if these major companies want to make a comeback, this is a good thing because they'll be able to trim the fat, push out a lot of the rot that's in there, and concentrate on just making good content. Just concentrate on making good books that you want to actually sell, not just trying to do identity politics to fit into whatever nonsense is going on in liberal Hollywood at the time. So in that way, it could be a good thing, but they have to make that decision and do that on their own. They can't. There's really no one that can make that decision for them but them at this point, and who knows if they even have that type of foresight to do so. Because obviously, if you're doing these comic books with this nonsense in there and it's not making money, but you keep doing the same thing, then that's obviously not your main goal. Your main goal is not to actually be successful. It's just to spout off and get on your soapbox, and it's caused your own downfall. So you guys let me know how you feel about it in the comments section. I'm very eager to see what you guys have to say about the collapse, because like, in my opinion, it's a shame. I'm not totally upset about it because I saw it coming, and there are other things that I like to read anyway, a lot of more independence that I'm more excited about anyway. But like I said before, as a classic comic book fan of Marvel and DC from the 80s and early 90s, it's a shame to see. You guys let me know how you feel about it in the comments section. Anyway, Chris Crazy House signing out. Peace.